Welcome back and good evening if you've just joined us. This is Africa News Network, First Fast Live. My name is Cindy Mabi. Our top story this hour, power utility Eskom has called the National Treasury's draft report on Tegeta contract factually incorrect. Eskom has blown holes in Treasury's Chief Procurement Office Skulk Human's report, pointing out several errors. Eskom believes that many of the Treasury's assertions are misplaced as they did not engage Eskom during the review process. Not just that, they also violated procedures in releasing the report to third parties without including Eskom's response. The hurry in which the report seems to have been compiled is reminiscent of the public protector Thulima Donzela's State of Capture report, which also faced allegations of being rushed. And here are the questions raised by Eskom over the Treasury report. The Treasury's inquiry into Tegeta repayment is premature pending the outcome of a probe recommended by the public protector. And certain conclusions in Treasury's compliance report are patently wrong, and Treasury didn't seek a meeting with Eskom for clarity on the information provided. Treasury's assertion that Eskom overpaid for coal demonstrates the lack of understanding of coal supply agreements. A draft report shared with the parliamentary panel and the Auditor General in violation of assurance by the former Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan, and Treasury did not have enough information and documents to draw conclusions. The draft report released even as Eskom was still collating information requested by Treasury on the 23rd of March.
We are being consulted in the past 1.5 years regarding this report, and every time, whenever they asked any questions from us, we replied it to the best of our ability and to the best of their satisfaction. And in our last communication, we made it very clear to them that this report should not be made public or released to anybody unless and until our comments are not taken on the final report. Because in the past, every time before the question comes to us, the similar question used to come from the media. And this time also, we received the report. The report has been signed on 5th, and we received it on 7th. And simultaneously, you people have also received the report. So that means that this confidentiality of this report is not being kept as promised by National Treasury. And in my opinion, this is basically to make a perception in the public based on the so-called flimsy comments in the report, for which we have every answer to reply, and the intention is to malign the relationship between Tegeta and Eskom.
Treasury's draft report says a payment made to Tegeta for Brakfontein coal is irregular as Tegeta paid more than the base price of R13.50, and Eskom calls Treasury's statement reckless as it ignores the contractual price adjustment for diesel. Tegeta says the Treasury has completely overlooked instances when actual price was lower than the base price. And Treasury report says it's unclear why Eskom signed an agreement until 2025 and knowing the mining license expires in 2020. Eskom clarifies that Treasury was provided with documents that set out the rationale for a 10-year contract, and Tegeta says the mining rights for Brakfontein mine are valid until 2024 and can be further extended. Treasury asserts that Eskom may have acted negligently by accepting coal before full combustion tests, but Eskom calls the claims baseless as all tests were conducted and Treasury was notified. Tegeta says combustion test samples were submitted to Eskom on the 10th of March 2015. Treasury's draft report offered 659 million rand paid as an advance to Tegeta should be treated as a loan, as money was not used for capacity augmentation. Eskom's response: the Treasury's loan argument is pure nonsense, as repayment was done to mitigate a blackout risk. And of course, Tegeta's response is that the advance was used to open new drag lines to increase production. And Tegeta's discount of 3.5% resulted in a saving of 21.5 million rand for Eskom, far greater than the interest. And Eskom would have earned a loan, or rather a profit from this. Now, Treasury's draft report is non-compliant shipments were delivered to Majuba Power Station, and Eskom's response is Treasury doesn't understand the difference between reject coal and contract coal. And Eskom never paid for any reject coal, and Tegeta's response is that only when a stockpile is approved by Eskom that the dispatch begins from the approved stockpile. And joining us live in studio is ANN7 business editor Clive Ramatibela-Smith and political analyst Tsepo Khadima. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. I see you have that grin on your face, so you can clarify this in one simple word. What's going on? I'll start with you, Clive.
One that has to understand, and good evening to you, by the way, Sinde, and the rest of the viewers as well. One needs to understand the industry of coal, to understand the intricacies that are involved in signing up to contracts and what Eskom requires of those that actually supply coal to it, and how they obtain that, and through a very vigorous procurement process that needs to adhere to the highest legislation. Not only that, but needs to meet the requirements of the PFMA. So it is very, very important that we line that out first before we start talking about the actual contract with Tegeta. Now, I've been recently involved deeply in understanding and analysing what happens within the coal industry, and I'm sure my brother Tsepo will be able to explain to us even in further, because he's got more experience than I do. What I understand is that people secure coal like a supply. So, for example, in the retail industry or the wholesaler industry in South Africa, when a wholesaler such as your Pick n Pay is buying stuff or buying goods from the likes of Tiger brand or whoever it is that is supplying to them, what they do to secure the trucks that will be coming through to deliver those goods, they are able to pay an upfront fee to confirm that they are serious about getting these 10 trucks that will be delivering these goods to them. And that's a prepayment. So they pay that upfront to make sure that they secure those goods, that they do arrive there on time. In this case, it seems like what National Treasury is saying, it's suggesting, is that this prepayment is not taken up as a securing factor to the actual production of coal, where we were going through a very difficult time, where the country was going through what we used to call load shedding. And therefore, they take that as some sort of unique payment that was made as profit, or as a loan, as they put it, to Tegeta to be able to produce the coal. What people don't take into consideration is that Tegeta, the mine itself, had been there way before the Gupta family got involved. And so the contracts were there, they were signed, they were already signed into contract for a period of time. All that happened was Eskom realized that if we don't secure the coal, we won't be able to provide the electricity to the people, and we might sit with a predicament in the future. And so they were able then to do what they call prepayment, which is currently, as we speak, you can ask any trader in the world, it's the same system that they use, where they secure the coal that they require for that power station so that they are able to operate.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard from Kulipasiwa, the Eskom board, under Dr. Ben Ngubane, etc., deposing in the parliamentary ad hoc hearing that all of this is done above board, but there seems to be an appetite around the Tegeta Eskom contract, albeit that, again, this time we hear from Eskom and Tegeta that there hadn't been adequate consultation before this draft report by Mr. Human Skulk was released from Treasury. There's even allegations that he hadn't even fully read the contract and the terms, the technicalities around it before coming to all these allegations.
Look, I think, Cindy, I first want to start by saying that the special interest that National Treasury has on the relationship specifically between Eskom as well as Tegeta and Optimum Coal Holdings, has not been explained. And perhaps maybe now, under the new leadership at Treasury, they need to do that. Why are they specifically, of all the 27 or so suppliers of coal into Eskom operations, why is there material specific interest on this one contract? Secondly, when you look at really what is available in the public domain, there are no references to the competent persons who worked on this investigation. And by competent persons, I'm talking about metallurgists, I'm talking about chemical engineers, I'm talking about mine engineers, I'm talking about geologists, and even lawyers, for example. Because lawyers will come in to the extent that if you say, look, I am converting, reading from a coal supply contract, I'm now going to convert that into a loan or anything else. That has to be reduced to writing, cannot be just something that you contain in a report. And the question then becomes, well, how do you arrive at that indeed there must be a loan agreement, and the key word there being agreement, because it's not something you can do arbitrarily. But let's go to the technicalities. When you look at the technicalities, the biggest worry for me is that we've seen in recent years, National Treasury that has always chewed more than what it is capable of being able to chew. In this case, this investigation, for starters, if indeed they had the competent persons, those that know more about coal and know more about power plant operations, it should not have been an investigation that would have taken more than a month. Yeah. So when you look at the difficulties that they had in drafting this report, you can clearly see that Mr. Kenneth Brown and his predecessor, who we also understand that is now leaving National Treasury, Mr. Skalk-Human, both of them, they know very little about coal, and the little that they know is the dangerous part. It is a dangerous part as we see the manner in which it manifests in the agreement, because it casts suspicion. There hasn't been any explanation as to, for example, none of the the coal that is being supplied is mine mouth. So the power plants in question are using coal from 4 to 5 different coal miners. So clearly meaning that the coal is itself blended. And when you say that the coal did not meet the requirement, particularly in terms of combustion, I can assure you the viewers at home would have seen that in a load shedding. And that did not happen. You therefore cannot technically sustain an argument that the coal did not meet the material contracts. It was President Zuma who in 2009, when I was remarking somewhere else, he said, Hausa Zebe, Boza, and that's really all that Treasury should have done. If they didn't know, and clearly they didn't know, Mr. Skalk-Human didn't know, he should have just simply asked the competent persons, and there are plenty they could have explained.
Yeah, I mean, we cannot divorce the issues in terms of what the political landscape and volatility there is, primarily when it comes to Eskom, the Gupta family, businesses, etc. I mean, both Eskom and Tegeta has called this report or the observations from Treasury as nonsensical, saying that it's unfactual, very strong words in saying that it undermines what the legitimacy of the business is. And parallel to that, they also question the propriety in that it's running parallel with the State of Capture report, which still needs to have a judicial inquiry. You know, for just general South Africans like myself, if you were to explain it all, taking away what most would call propaganda or trying to hide some untoward business and etc., Clive, just in a nutshell.
It is problematic, and it saddens me at the same time that here we are discussing a very legit transaction that seems above board in all context, and legal fraternity trying to spite out or create a sort of an ulterior motive, as it were, with regards to what the actual contractual agreements were. What I would like to see from the side of Treasury is investigating not just one contract, like Sepp was referring to, that there's a number of other suppliers. Why the scrutiny is just now all of a sudden zoomed into this particular one as if it is unique to what Eskom has been doing in the past. Because when you strip it out and you look at what is actually left, you'll see that Eskom is actually in a very difficult predicament. They're paying far much more to these long-term contracts than what they should be. The reason why we set in a 2008, 2007, 2008 a crisis where we had load shedding was because they were put, a gun was put to their heads to say, listen, if you don't provide the kind of environment that is flexible to us, and bear in mind the us, then we will not be able to provide with these with the coal that you need. To such an extent that the company was actually prepared to go down under and ask for business rescue, without realizing that in actual fact there are people who will be prepared to take that on. Somebody must investigate that and why the reason behind that was, what happened. Why would a company that is working quite easily, that is able to provide, was blackmailing the national carrier to say that they must pay more? But not only that, let's leave that for now. But I just want to focus on what Sepa tried to put into context. Now, if there's these irregularities that we're referring to both in business, both in technical ability, in the actual contrast or the contract that was signed up, then it must be revealed. Legally, it must be tested, and we must be able to see what the truth is. However, in this case, it seems like we're drawing information, we're drawing alternative facts, as they would put it on CNN. Alternative facts that now are the reason why and the basis. And by the way, this leaked report, you must remember, it's a leaked report. So we don't know what the final report will look like. So we're working on something that in actual fact was leaked to media. And if it was coming from the other side, it would be interesting to find out if the guys would be looking at this report the same way, because now it's leaked. Now there's two sides to the coin, and so everybody's trying to really battle or rebattle whatever it is that is already being introduced. So I'm very concerned about that.
But what can come out of this besides the slander and obviously the assumptions and insinuations around irregularity within the Eskom and Tegeta deal? What else could come out of this?
There's many deals that could be also irregular. There's many deals that we can also now identify, which are factual, which the Competition Commission has raised, which are there, it's evidence. And in actual fact, we've got admission of guilt. So for me, it would be like, well, you know what, this is a leaked report, but everybody's making noise about it. Why not wait and see what the actual final report will look like before we start jumping into it?
Look, I mean, my view is that in the current constitutional democracy that South Africa is, there's a great deal of transparency that is advocated for and amongst all. So clearly meaning that the report leaking or being prematurely released, that is unfortunately the nature of the game now that we're in. However, it means therefore that people should not be using that to then go and draft reports that are shoddy, as this report is. It's very shoddy work, only to go and achieve a particular interest of tarnishing somebody else. Character assassination must not be the motive towards one's work. So what we need to be asking as a nation is that when people clearly abuse their position, and when you produce shoddy work, it is abuse of position, what consequences will such a person suffer for having acted with prejudice towards another person who is protected by the same constitution? But transparency means that whatever that we do is going to come to light. We must therefore be comfortable that as and when it comes to light, prematurely or within time, we must be comfortable with the contents. But you should not then go and carry out your work as an official, achieving a particular interest, because that is not that is not what is expected. It is not the conduct that we should tolerate, and we should demand better. We should demand a higher standard for those that are entrusted with ensuring that there can be a proper accountability as is required in terms of our constitution. In this case, we will not be able to achieve that level of accountability because this is a completely it's a contaminated well that we can't drink from.
Yeah, I mean, Eskom laments the fact that they weren't given an opportunity to submit to more information.
No, they shouldn't.
And the technical nitty-gritties to this report. Why were they denied that,
it's a leaked report,
opportunity?
So they shouldn't actually be explaining what, that they were not given opportunities and whatever. It's a leaked report, we shouldn't be entertaining it in actual fact. We should wait for the final outcome, hear what it is that the National Treasury has to say, and then make recommendations based on findings that are factual. That is the final report, and we can now discuss it. But however, it is what Tepo is referring to that is a problem, Cindy. It's the fact that it's already out there, and it becomes a challenge, therefore, because now you are sitting with the judicial, the judgment, as it were, which is out now, is put into public observation, and people now have to comment. And so it becomes very difficult, it becomes a challenge, in actual fact, to now rationalize the reasons behind that contract, simply because it's leaked, and it's whoever is the source of the leakage, unfortunately, as it is in your house when you have a leakage, you have to find the spot and find how to block it, but unfortunately the water is already in the house. So what happens is now, you are doing a reaction. So now people are very, and that's the objective, by the way, of leaking information. The objective and the thought process is already being now fragmented, and now people are starting to think outside of what the reality is, and they're starting to make conclusions, and even reporters in media. And I blame media, I blame us, that we are now starting to talk about something that is actually not the final report, it's not legit. And now we are forced to get responses from Eskom to say, how do you feel about this? And they're saying, well, we don't know because this is not what we submitted. So we must wait and hear what the Treasury has to say. Well, and we're yet to hear that.
And this supports the case that Eskom is saying that this is part of a smear campaign to perpetuate that perception of irregularity within the power utility. And this doesn't help in where the country is supposed to go in terms of development and ensuring that there's enough energy reserves, etc., while we're busy with all these allegations.
Look, clearly, I think Eskom specifically, I think they are being distracted. This is an unnecessary distraction when they need to be ensuring that every megawatt hour can be produced to get this economy going. They are being distracted. But now, speaking as somebody who knows about coal and knows about energy and electricity, and I can say that I'm the authority in that regard. If and when this report comes before the courts in litigation, I can assure you the expert witnesses are going to blow it out of the water before the judges, and the judges will find no other way other than to really sink National Treasury's cause, because what there has been happened here, it just clearly doesn't make sense to those that come from the industry. And already they have a difficulty that they cannot undo. They cannot go and reference who are the expert witnesses who helped them in the preparation of the report. And such expert witnesses will not be able to undo already what they've reduced to paper. If indeed they exist, they will only just confirm that in fact they know nothing about coal and they should never be allowed in either coal or electricity generation.
Yeah.
And can I just add to that? Within this narrative that's been built, that is, by the way, very mischievous. Is it a coincidence that this report comes shortly after Brian Molefe resigned from Eskom? Is it a coincidence that after the Public Protector's report that these things start to be unraveled, as it were, as if it is pointed at Eskom and its inefficiencies? We just heard, but by the way, financial reports. Eskom's reports, financial reports are public. Nobody knows, I don't know if anybody knows that, but they're public. So if you want to scrutinize the numbers, if you want to scrutinize where the profits come from, by the way, they are recording profits. It might not be great. It might be at 2.5%, 3.5%. Yet at the same time, it is still better turnover than what they saw last year. And so that means that they are making money as a state-owned enterprise. And we focus so much on the alternative, as it were, as opposed to the functioning of the actual operations and the fact that it's actually being a successful business that has delivered electricity. That's why we're looking so bright and in light color right now as we speak, because we're able to connect with our people, because we've got electricity. Yeah. So the question is, what is behind all these snabs that have been struck with Eskom? And if they are really legitimate, we must be able to expose them. We must be able to put them outside because they are a public enterprise. The financials are out. If there's auditors that are finding things that are incorrect and something that is not legit with what they're doing, they must highlight that. They must report it to the FIC. Yeah. For heaven's sake, they must do it. Yeah. Because it means that there's an attack.
the
we need to
leaking
find out
of
what
this,
what
the leaking
reason
of the
behind it is.
report as
Yeah.
well to the much spoken about cabinet reshuffle with the
Yeah.
removal of Pravin Gordhan and Mcebisi Jonas.
Well, most certainly you can't help but have to draw a link. And you draw a link when you see the level of desperation by which people are trying to make something to look that it is egregious, when in fact it is not. And it is not a departure from customary processes that in this case Eskom would employ, regardless of which entity they are dealing with when it comes to contracting. But I think that from my side, Cindy, when I'm looking at this, I'm remembering Gerinel when he was prosecuting the Oscar Pistorius case, and when he was sent to Roger Dixon, and when Roger Dixon obviously was himself shocked that he produced a report that was contrary. And he said this to Mr. Roger Dixon, he said, you see how irresponsible it is to make inferences on subject matters you know nothing about. And Treasury should, from this case, learn to really start only confining themselves on subjects they know about. And particularly the National Procurement Officer, they should only tackle those issues they know something about. Things that they don't know anything about, they should stop, because they are going to be facing litigation and they are going to be sued. Such litigation will fall like Niagara. Can we afford that as a country? We can't.
All right, Sepa, we're going to leave it there.
Last words for you,
very
Cindy,
quickly.
very quickly. I want to move a little bit from what Sepp was saying and say business is business. We only do things on factual information. We don't have factual information in this case. All that's done is inferences, like he's mentioned. And so until it's tested, until we know that in actual fact these things are not irregular, when you say something is irregular, it means it's not happening in the system of things.
Yeah,
we need
and
to
you'd be able
realize
to prove it.
we need to prove that that's actually what's happened here.
All right, gentlemen, really appreciate your time. Clive Ramatibela-Smith is ANN7 business editor and the anchor for BizPulse, a political and economic analyst, Tsepo Khadima, joining us in studio. We take a quick ad break.